The spaces between us. Chapter 1, The Chance Encounter. It was a chilly autumn evening in New York, the kind where the wind carried the scent of fresh rain and fallen leaves. Maya hadn't planned to stay out this late. She had just finished a long shift at the small, independent bookstore where she worked. Her life had become a routine: books, coffee, and silence. She loved the peace of her simple existence, but, at times, wondered if this was all there was. The subway station was almost empty when she arrived. She sat on a cold metal bench, headphones in her ears, trying to block out the world with her favorite music. That's when she saw him. He was standing by the edge of the platform, staring at the tracks as if lost in thought. He had an air of mystery about him, with his dark coat, unkempt hair, and a book under his arm. Their eyes met for just a second. Maya quickly looked away, but something about him caught her attention. When she looked up again, he was gone. The train roared into the station, and as she stepped inside, she saw him sitting in the same car. He was reading the book, a classic edition of The Great Gatsby. For some reason, this small detail made her heart skip a beat. She found herself stealing glances at him from across the car. He was completely absorbed in his book, oblivious to the world around him. Maya wondered if he had noticed her at all. Chapter 2, A Conversation Begins. The next evening, Maya found herself taking the same train, at the same time. She didn't believe in fate, but some part of her hoped she'd see him again. And she did. He was in the same spot, reading another book. This time, it was To Kill a Mockingbird. She sat across from him, too shy to say anything. But the third night, the train wasn't as empty, and they ended up sitting side by side. The silence between them was palpable, but Maya could feel his presence as if they were the only two people on the train. Finally, gathering all her courage, she broke the silence. "I noticed you like classics," she said, nodding toward his book. He looked up, surprised, as if he hadn't even realized someone was sitting next to him. A small smile appeared on his face. "Yeah. I like books that make you think." His voice was deep, calm, and soothing. Maya felt her nerves calm down just by hearing it. "I work at a bookstore," she said, trying to keep the conversation going. "I've read both of those." He raised an eyebrow. "A fellow book lover? I'm impressed. Most people seem to avoid them these days." They spent the rest of the train ride talking about their favorite novels, exchanging recommendations and thoughts on various authors. His name was Daniel, and Maya learned that he was an architect. He worked late hours and used the train rides to unwind with a good book. When the train arrived at her stop, she felt a strange sense of disappointment. She had enjoyed their conversation more than she expected. "See you tomorrow?" she asked, surprising herself with how forward she was being. Daniel grinned. "I'll be here." Chapter 3, Growing Closer. Over the next few weeks, Maya and Daniel met on the train almost every evening. Their conversations grew deeper, moving from books to life. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, and the fears they kept hidden from the world. Daniel told her about his dream to design a building that would become a landmark, something that would outlast him. Maya, on the other hand, revealed her fear that she was wasting her life, stuck in the comfort of her bookstore, too afraid to pursue her own writing. "I've always wanted to write," Maya confessed one night as the train rattled through the underground tunnels. "But every time I try, I just freeze." "Why?" Daniel asked, genuinely curious. "I think I'm afraid it won't be good enough. Or maybe I'm scared that if I put my thoughts on paper, people will see the real me, and they won't like what they see." Daniel was silent for a moment, thinking. "I think," he began slowly, "that the scariest thing in life isn't failing. It's never trying. I spend every day designing things that might never get built, but I do it because it's what I love." Maya smiled at him. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not. But you have to start somewhere." Their connection grew stronger with each conversation. They didn't just talk about books anymore. They shared their lives, their hopes, their fears, and somewhere along the way, something more began to blossom. Maya found herself looking forward to the evenings on the train more than anything else in her day. Chapter 4: A Leap of Faith. Winter came quickly, and with it, a biting cold. One evening, as snow began to fall heavily outside the subway station, Maya and Daniel found themselves sitting closer than usual. The warmth of his presence next to her was comforting in the cold metal of the train car. "I've been thinking," Daniel said quietly, breaking the silence. "About what?" "About us. About how much I've grown to care for you." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had been feeling the same way, but the fear of ruining what they had held her back. Now, hearing the words from his mouth, the emotions she had kept buried rose to the surface. "I care about you too," she admitted softly. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her cold skin. For a moment, they sat in silence, the noise of the train fading into the background as the world outside the window turned into a snowy blur. "Let's get off at the next stop," Daniel said suddenly. Maya blinked. "What?" "Let's get off the train and just walk. No destination, no plans. Just us." Without thinking, Maya nodded. They stepped off at the next station and emerged into the snowy streets of Manhattan. The city was quieter than usual, muffled by the falling snow. They walked through the streets, hand in hand, without speaking. The world felt different, as if it had slowed down just for them. They ended up at a small park, sitting on a bench under a street lamp. The snowflakes fell gently around them, and Maya couldn't remember the last time she had felt so peaceful, so alive. Daniel turned to her, his eyes full of something she couldn't quite define. "I don't know where this will go, but I want to find out. With you." Maya smiled, her heart full. "Me too." Chapter 5: The Distance Between Us. For a while, everything was perfect. They continued their routine, meeting on the train, spending evenings together, exploring the city. But as the months passed, reality began to set in. Daniel's work became more demanding, and Maya found herself retreating into her comfort zone, avoiding the risk of pursuing her writing career. The spaces between them began to grow, not physically, but emotionally. Maya could feel it happening, but she didn't know how to stop it. She was scared of losing him, but at the same time, scared of losing herself. Daniel, too, seemed distant, as if the pressures of his career were pulling him away from her. One evening, after a particularly silent train ride, Maya finally spoke up. "Daniel, what's happening to us?" He looked at her, his face troubled. "I don't know, Maya. I feel like we're both drifting." Maya's heart sank. She had known it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to lose you either. But maybe we both need to figure out who we are, separately, before we can be together fully." The words hung in the air between them. Maya knew he was right, but it didn't make it any less painful. Chapter 6: Finding the Way Back. In the weeks that followed, they decided to take a step back from their relationship, giving each other space to grow as individuals. Maya threw herself into her writing, finally taking the leap she had been too scared to make. It wasn't easy, but slowly, she began to find her voice. Daniel, too, focused on his work, but he never stopped thinking about her. Months passed, and one evening, Maya found herself on the same train, holding a copy of the book she had finally written. She hadn't seen Daniel in a long time, but she felt stronger now, more sure of herself. As the train pulled into the station, she looked up, and there he was, standing on the platform, just as he had been the first time they met. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. He stepped into the car and sat down next to her. "You wrote it," he said, nodding toward the book in her hands. Maya smiled. "I did." Daniel took her hand, just like he had that snowy night. "I'm proud of you." "I missed you," Maya whispered. "I missed you too," Daniel replied softly. "Maybe now, We can find our way back to each other." Maya leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence once again. This time, they were ready. This time, they had found themselves, and each other, in the spaces between.